It's safe to say this is Washington's most important recruiting weekend in years.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's not Lars Hanson right there. That's Brian Smith, our wonderful recruiting expert with us here on the Locked On Network. That down there is Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Inside the Huskies at Athlon Sports. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And Brian, you and I were just talking before the show here about how this is such a big weekend. Washington's got 10, I believe is the number now, blue chip recruits that are coming to campus. And we want to start with this just exciting group of guys in the secondary, which is headlined by a top 50 recruit nationally in cornerback Dijon Lee. You've said you've seen him in person. What are some of your thoughts on this guy?
He is the rare combination of calm personality. Like, he's a really nice guy to talk to. Calm personality, but when it's time to line up in front of somebody, whether he's playing press man, press bail, going up against an elite kid, going up against a nobody, he has the same business-like approach, which is good. Because you're going to get beat at DB. I don't care how good you are. And he does things with a 6'3 plus frame. He's listed at 6'4. Like, I've stood in front of him multiple times. That is a big dude. And he can flip his hips and run like that and be a man. The only thing that he ever has trouble with is the same for everybody. The little 5'9 slot receivers, taller corners aren't going to handle them as well, but he gets over the top. He breaks on the ball. He's physical. Just a tremendous prospect. Nobody's can't miss, but out of the kids on the West Coast, because his personality and all the physical makeup and how he plays, he's about as close as it's going to get.
I love his fit in because he's got just a huge group of visits lined up. Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M coming up after Washington. But I just love his fit in this defense so much, which is run by defensive coordinator Steve Belichick. And just seeing how guys in that system have succeeded in New England for so long. Lars, I know this is something you and I have talked about a lot too, is it seems like he would be a guy that could start at Washington from day one.
I was going to say, yeah, in terms of, I'm not sure if that was the half question or not, but
no. Yeah, just go for it.
When you look at the schools that he's competing against, where do you see Washington's chances with a guy like Djon Lee? Because you look at, you got Alabama, you got 2 Texas schools, you got Georgia. I don't want to say, I'm not a big fan of percentage chances, but maybe on like a 1 to 10 scale, does Washington, in your view, have a legitimate shot? I'm not saying they will get him, but is this something where this is a potentially winnable battle for Washington, in your opinion?
When I interviewed him in January, I saw him in Miami at the Battle Tournament. It's the biggest 7-on event we have every year. We all go to it, all the recruiting guys. He told me to my face pretty much the same list that he has now. Bama and Georgia were involved, and like SC and UCLA are obviously going to be involved, but Washington, etc. So he's very consistent. So if you liked Washington then and they're on your list now and you visited, you have a chance. I don't think he's a kid that cares about travel much. The 2 times I've seen him have both been in Florida. Like, the kid just loves football. He went to the Future 50 event at IMG Academy that Under Armour runs. It's an invite-only top, best out of the best in the country last summer. That's where I first saw him, like, who is that? Because, like, even amongst those guys, he stood out. And I don't think anybody's going to be surprised with where he goes. His list has been very consistent, which is rare nowadays, by the way.
So, Brian, as we look at some of these other visitors that are on this list, Madden Faraimo, Matai Tagoa'i, Dylan Robinson, is there anybody just among that group, Darius Dixon being another one, is there anyone among that group that might stand out to you fit at Washington, whether it be just for their fit in the defense or just what they could turn into physically with a couple of years in the college weight room?
I'll go with Madden, the linebacker out of Sarah High School on the edge of L.A. Watching his film, I watched it again today. I question myself in 3 regards. Would he be better as a pass rusher, a stand-up like end in a 3-4 kind of defense, or one of the hybrid defenses? Would he be better as a will so he doesn't take on as many linemen but can run around guys even though he's physical and 220 plus? Or should he just put him at Mike and just let him be what most people think is just a downhill thumper who also can run to the sideline and get to a screen? Like, he has so much versatility. That's a guy that can play early in pretty much any defense. I don't care if it's 3-4, 4-3, 3-3-5, whatever. I think that's a special football player. I want to say he's ranked in the 60s by 24/7 or something like that. I think he's a top 50 prospect nationally. Again, flexibility, speed, athleticism, natural size to play in the box as a freshman is rare, and he has all of those traits. I think they're all good, the players you mentioned, but Madden would be the guy I'm most in love with out of that group.
Yeah, I love the way that this defense just provides so much versatility, and it would give him the option to do all of those things. I mean, I could see him lining up as a strong safety, just depending on what the personnel package that's out there is. And it's one of those things where, as you said, at his size, he moves so well too that if you want to just stick him at Mike linebacker, that truly wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Lars, I know another guy that we've talked about on the show a lot is Matai Tagoa'i, and he has it's official now, across the recruiting pages that he is going to be coming to campus this weekend. Is that someone that's maybe stood out to you as somebody that you'd keep an eye on in terms of maybe flipping from USC to Washington?
Yeah, that would be one to me where if you look at Washington initially was big on Tagoa'i before he committed to USC. Does the USC allure still stand under Lincoln Riley? Because you mentioned, when Dijon Lee had Washington consistently on his list, you got Jedd Fisch in Washington now. Does Jedd Fisch have that same cachet that Lincoln Riley and other schools have when they're competing against some of these other schools?
I don't think many guys have Lincoln Riley's cachet, but this is a defensive prospect. So I think that cachet works in reverse. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think Lincoln Riley is the most overrated head coach in college football because it's just true. Like you can tell by the way they do not tackle in games, especially as the season goes along, that they don't hit enough in practice to cater to his offense. That's not how you win championships. But his name is huge. His contract is huge. It's Southern Cal. It's not a hard sell for a kid that lives on the edge of Los Angeles. He lives on the south edge of LA. I mean, I get it. I know the kid. He's a great guy. He can play for anybody, and he's a super physical player. Could be a strong safety or free safety. I don't think the defense matters. He could play at Georgia. That's the easiest thing to put. I tell people on shows all the time, and their fans get mad, but it's still true. There is one program way ahead of everybody else in terms of all their things that they got going. It's UGA. If the kid can play there, we're good. This kid can do that.
So, Brian, one thing that I was really wondering that I wanted to ask you about is what has stood out to you the most now that Jedd Fisch's coaching staff has come to Washington? Because it seems they've done a really good job just getting some of these top prospects on campus. We've gone through the list of some of the guys who are going to be on campus this weekend. But another guy who he hosted during the spring game was four-star safety LaDarian Clarity, who's from down there in Pensacola, Florida. Right. And it's really impressive to see what the staff has been able to do with, a school that's typically just had the West Coast allure, but they're going into Texas, they're going into Alabama, they're going into Florida and getting guys on official visits, which has been pretty rare for them in the past.
There's only been a couple of times in my life that Washington's recruited in the South very much at all. They got a couple of kids from South Florida, including a running back about 25 years ago that was really good. But by and large, they really just haven't. And it's kind of shocking. Because, they've always just hammered LA, San Francisco, the Peninsula, and stuff like that, had a top 20 program. But Fisch has got a different approach, I guess. And I think it's kind of cool. Because in today's world, even the schools that live where I do, and I live in the state of Alabama, you can throw a rock and hit a defensive lineman that's going to play Power 4 football. Okay? We have the right players really local. You got to get some of it. It's not easy, though. But you got a lot of guys out there, and they're trying to cherry pick to add on top of it. I love the effort because if you don't try, you're not going to beat Georgia and Alabama anyway. You can't allow them to get all the D linemen. Okay. So that's the first thing. And the second is they don't care who they're going against. That tells me they got a confident staff that is invested in being there. Lord help us if we could find some staffs that actually wanted to stay together in college football. I understand taking the money when you get off. I get it. But I grew up when staffs would stay somewhere. Like Virginia Tech staff, Penn State staff, et cetera. They were together forever. Coordinator would stay for 20 years. That never happens now. The way they're moving, the way they're doing their recruiting gives me some hope. And I'm not a Washington fan by any means. I just like continuity. Maybe Fisch is going to be there a while, which is not his MO. He's moved around constantly in his career, but you don't recruit like this just to get up the next morning, pack your bags and leave. So I love the whole holistic approach.
Brian, with that being said, let's jump into some of these guys on the offensive side. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, which is great for me as a Celtics fan because I love seeing the Celtics in the finals. And now it's just a matter of, hey, who are they going to play? Love to see it against either team. And I'll be out there in Boston for a potential Game 5 or a Game 7. So maybe I'll have to use the Game Time app because there's so many great things you can do on it, like last-minute deals. We can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You got zone deals where you can save even more when you choose a sectional at Game Time, choose the seats, and you get seat views where you get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. You can take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Brian, one guy that is another late addition to this visit schedule, where he was in, then he was out going to Penn State. Now he's back in. He's top 75 player nationally, and that's Andrew Marsh from Katy Jordan High School down in Houston. And you and I were talking about him very briefly before the show. I absolutely love his film. This dude can play anywhere.
I think he could play safety. I think he could play slot. I think he could play some corner, whatever he wanted. He's just a good football player. But since he's most likely to play receiver, let's focus on that. Some guys have a slippery nature to them, for lack of a better phrase. When he gets hit, he just finds a way to bounce off. Like it's like he's a greased pig or something. He finds a way to get away from the guy trying to latch onto him. And then once he gets a step on somebody, not many catch him. And he's playing in Houston. Okay, Houston's a top 10 city in America for high school football. He's running away from players that matter. So, yeah, I can get why he's a top 200 recruit by pretty much everybody, and I can see why you might put him in the top 100. He's a national recruit.
Lars, are there any of these four pass catchers that are on campus that might stand out to you? Because Andrew Marsh is certainly just like the number one guy in terms of the rankings, but there are some really talented guys that are coming to campus this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the one that I'm going to beat the drum for every single day, every single week until it happens is Phillip Bell. When you look at Dijon Lee's teammate, Mission Viejo, with Washington having those three receivers go in the draft, does that truly help a guy like Jedd Fisch, knowing that he didn't coach those guys? But every coach is going to sell the last coach and the last staff that had success and things like that. I mean, you'd be dumb not to. But does that actually matter for a kid like Phillip Bell, who's had long-standing interest as well in Washington?
Well, he can sell what he did at Arizona. He had a young quarterback, and they threw it around. So I just think, hey, I came here, even though we were doing that at Arizona, because I got more opportunity here. You have to sell what you have in front of you. In Washington's history, no offense to Arizona, that is night and day when it comes to football success. This is not hoops. That's a different podcast all to itself. So I think it's pretty easy to see, hey, I've done it. Washington's got a history of it. They were just in the championship game. We have something to sell here for you. At least come visit and check it out. And he's getting those kids to come on campus. And like, again, they did it with a young quarterback, and they were throwing it all over the place at Arizona. They're going to be able to get better players at Washington. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that the kid's going to visit or taking a serious look at him. So, and he's a California kid too.
So, Brian, unprompted when we were doing our pre-show prep, one guy that you brought up that you really like is four-star athlete Dylan Robinson. Lars and I had a long debate on and off the air over the last couple of days about, is he a corner? Is he a safety? Is he a receiver? I like him at receiver. Lars likes him at corner, safety. And you unprompted threw your hat in the ring and said, I love him at receiver.
That's the only film that I've really tried to watch is receiver. But there's two reasons I'll go with that spot. Number one, at 6'3"-ish, the chances at sticking at corner long-term aren't necessarily great. There are a few elite corners that are bigger, Lee being one, DJ Pickett, a kid down in my neck of the woods, being the other. But receivers today, use Washington. 6'2" guys that have ball skills or taller, they're just nothing you can do with them if you really have a quarterback. Now, obviously, Washington's offense last year is kind of historical in how they were just clutch with down the field throw. I mean, it was ridiculous. But it still creates that opportunity for a quarterback that's not as good. 3rd down and 8 there's not a play call that Jebb's going to go to that's a lock. But if you throw it to a 6'3" receiver, I like the odds better than the 5'11" guy. That's just the way it is. So he makes those catches. He's got pretty good speed and pretty good change of direction. Could he play DB? Absolutely. I just think he would change more games in today's style at his size on offense. 6 one way, half dozen the other, but I'll take the offensive side of the ball.
And another guy who Lars and I have talked a lot about is because tight end is going to be a really important position for Washington in this coming recruiting cycle after losing a couple guys to the draft. Caleb Edwards, another guy sitting just outside the top 100. Is he a guy you've watched any film on? Because he seems like somebody who I made the bold take on the show a couple of weeks ago. He seems like he could just fit in on a depth chart as a true freshman, even at tight end.
It's possible. It depends on how you want to use him. Jebb's a good enough coach where the main thing you look at with freshmen historically, forget the team, forget the era, whatever. If a kid is going to play outside the box, not linebacker, O-line, or D-line, his chances of playing go up exponentially. You need grown man strength to block guys. Like there are kids that I know that bench 300 plus in high school. They go to college and get bludgeoned in their first fall camp. And I tell them coming up, like, when I go to fall camp, I'm going to say something to you about it because it's different. There's no way to make them understand that the kid you're going against has been hit for 3 years and has been through the weight program for 3 years at State U. It's different. But he can get split out some. He's an athlete. And again, it's just kind of like we were talking about Robinson. How many guys are going to guard a 6'4", 220, 230 guy in a one-on-one 50-50? Not many. It's a pain. And that's why, to me, the most unique position now in football is tight end, because you can take a guy like that, put him in the slot, he can block a nickel, and you can run a screen. That nickel has no chance against a 225-pound guy that's motivated to block. Then on the next play, it acts like he's going to block and run a seam route and score. It's tight end has completely changed the game. A friend of mine that's a defense coordinator hates the spread because of what I'm just talking about right there. Like we had that conversation. He goes, there's nothing you can do. You don't know where they're going to line up. So guys like this have exponential value compared to what they used to. And obviously DeBoer and that staff, they figured that out pretty quick. Big receivers, a tight end, whatever, they put guys in matchup situations. Edwards could be that guy too for Washington moving forward.
And one last guy that Roman, I was going to say one last guy that Roman hasn't mentioned that he, well, at least hasn't mentioned today, but has mentioned countless times on the show is Chris Lawson. Yeah. Have you had a chance to review any of his film yet? And when it comes to pass catchers, of what you know, Jedd Fisch's offense, kind of what is the ideal style of receiver when it comes to receiver 2, 3, and 4? Because obviously they have Rain Vinesbot already in the class.
I think it's a balance. Like the receiver, and I can't pronounce his name, the kid from Arizona that they had, he was over 6 foot. He knew the quarterback because they played together, etc. But they also ran a lot of screens and different things underneath to get guys that are a little shiftier to football. So I don't think there's a size, especially if you can give a guy like Fisch that boundary receiver, that big-bodied guy that's going to go up against a dude at corner. If you have that player and you get a couple shifty guys with him, then you can just mix and match. Washington obviously had all the above last year as an example. I don't think there is one. Are you a good route runner? Do you catch the ball, and are you competitive? Fisch will figure out the rest. He can take a wider range of players, which is good. Some coaches need a very specific skill set to be successful. I don't think Fisch is that way. So Lawson's a kid I don't know personally. He's a San Francisco kid, but he's ranked really high. So again, Washington's always recruited San Francisco and LA really well. That's not surprising. So I'll take Fisch's word for it.
Lars, what else you got?
I was going to say, when you look at what this class could be, there's a couple of offensive linemen. Is there one name, and this will kind of lead in a way to the next segment, but is there one or two guys where if you're Washington, you have to close? Or is this a case where Washington can kind of in a way be selective? Obviously, you're not going to be selective with a guy like Dijon Lee, but is there any guys that you could say, I would rather have him over him in this class?
There are 2 points here that go together, and you're correct on this. In recruiting, especially if you're a predominantly State U, this is who we are program like Washington that's always recruited well locally, you can't allow Alabama or insert said name of traditional power to come into your state and get kids. I live in the South, and I know Miami and several other schools have been interested in Demetri Manning, and he is a traditional, as far as a size, the kind of kid that Kirby wants at Georgia. Massive. They take big kids and actually get them to drop weight. Washington needs more guys like this because the reason they lost to Michigan, they could not block the interior of Michigan's D-line. They couldn't block it, and they caused too much trouble. Washington was still able to throw it, but they couldn't run it as well as they wanted. Guys like Manning can help you with that. He could be a guard or a tackle. He's just massive, but he's in your backyard. He's from Bellevue. That's a tradition-rich program. There's so many reasons you need this guy, and it would set a trend. Hey, we're not just going to throw the football. We're going to run it too, because I don't think too many defensive linemen want to line up in front of Dimitri, and that should help you long-term. Again, tradition-rich program just outside the area of Seattle. You got to get those kind of kids. And offensive tackles, man, look at the portal. How many good guys were in the portal for at the offensive tackle position? What, 2, 3? You better get the local kids at the high school. Yeah, I know. I'm being kind here. I'm being kind. It's offensive for whatever reason. Offensive linemen, even if they suck and they're not going to play somewhere, or they don't get on with the coach. I know one of these kids at a school. I won't mention who it is. He's going to write it out and get his degree, even though he could go somewhere else and play. They kind of beat to a different drummer. You better hit the high school ranks or JUCO kid, because you're not going to have options later on with the portal. So this kid's local. He's a national recruit. If you lose him in 3 years when he's starting for school X and not Washington, you can, hey, we missed. Cannot miss on those kids.
With that being said, let's get into some of the guys that might pop over the weekend. Right after a message from our good friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role in any given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, Brian, before we jump into this, one guy that you mentioned that is really intriguing that's taking a visit to Washington that certainly fills a massive position to need, especially with just the way this class is shaped up on the West Coast, is defensive tackle. And I feel one guy that this coaching staff is going to press really, really hard on is Chase Sims out of Texas, who's going to be visiting over the weekend.
Yeah, you can't have enough guys that can move, especially in a lateral sense, that are over 250 pounds on your roster. I grew up in the 90s when Florida State, Nebraska, Miami, certain teams were really dominant. And it's because they kicked your rear end in the trenches really bad. They had more D tackles than you did. Sims is one of those kind of guys. He's 290, 300 pounds. He could play nose. He could play 3 technique, but he could move off the snap and get into the backfield. He's not just a 2-gap, eat-up blockers kind of guy. I don't care where he's from. I talked about a minute ago, you got to protect your home area. Wherever defensive tackles are, you just got to go get them. There aren't anywhere near enough of them. And again, just like with offensive tackle, there were hardly any in the portal. And the ones that were demanding ridiculous money. Get the high school kid. It's cheaper in the long run, and you get to develop it. There you go.
Lars, there anybody you got your eye on?
Well, I was going to say this one apparently isn't visiting this weekend, but it is in your neck of the woods. Caleb Smith. What could you tell Washington fans about him? Because he was a guy that intrigued me. I do want to clarify, it doesn't look – Roman can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but apparently things have changed on some level in that regard for this weekend. But obviously a guy that has visited Washington unofficially has an offer. Anything you could offer on Caleb Smith? From Birmingham?
From Birmingham?
Billy Parker.
He goes to Parker. Plays with Jordan Thomas.
Not really, to be honest with you. I don't know him very well.
So, do you think Washington? Do you think, just real quick, but to add on to that, do you think Washington would have a legit shot to get a guy like that from the state of Alabama going all the way out? And do you think that's a good avenue for resources? Because obviously, certain guys you want to go get anywhere in the country, but he might not necessarily fit that mold.
Sometimes it's just random anymore. The state of Alabama is one of the 3 states, as an example, that are the hardest to recruit: Louisiana, Alabama, and Ohio. What do those 3 states have? Enormously successful in-state programs with cult-like followings from their fan bases. But not everybody's recruited ardently, even if they are a fan, by that school right out of the gate. So part of it's potluck. If you get in on kids, you build relationships with the staff, and you get them on campus, you got a shot. Like last year, Oregon signed an offensive tackle out of Birmingham that's like 390 pounds. He had offers from a bunch of SEC schools. He just liked his visit to Oregon. That was it. So sometimes you just got to walk into those kind of situations with an open mind and just recruit guys. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So, yeah, you got a chance if you get them on your campus. It's simple as this. Don't go by what they say, but what they do. If they visit your campus, there's an opportunity for you to sign that young man.
So, Brian, I've got one here for you. If you look at this weekend's visit schedule, is there anybody that's a perfect fit of Washington needs to close on this guy for whatever reason, whether it be positional value, just recruiting status, plus you think actually the interest might be mutual? I would say this is the one guy I think would be Washington's biggest commitment from this coming weekend.
Demetri Manning, for the reasons I mentioned, is a guy that you should keep your eye on. Edwards, I think that tight ends like that are rare. He would be huge, and it'd be kind of it's symbolic with both those kind of guys for different reasons. One's the in-state kid you need, but you're not going to win just with in-state kids. So Edwards would be great because he's from Tennessee. He's from California, but that's so rare to get a guy like that because you think, he's just going to go to SC. No, he's coming to Washington. We're sending a message, but there's such a good list. I'm looking at the whole list right now, and it's like there's nobody on here I wouldn't take. Right. So, I mean. Dylan Robinson, maybe, but, Bell's great. The most likely to me NFL player on the list is Lee. He might be a guy that could start right away. Madden Faraimo is a guy I think is an NFL player too. This is as good a list that I've seen Washington have. And I don't know who they have on their staff, but they figured it out because they're getting kids from all over the country and they're still hitting LA, which is always the most important for them. So they got 4 or 5 guys that are NFL possible players on their campus. They need to get at least one. Like they need something to get the ball rolling, but hey, if you're getting them on campus, you got a shot.
Lars, what'd you set the over-under at? You love setting over-unders for commits on a weekend.
I love setting over-unders and gambling for a reason. I'd probably say 3.5. 3.5 because and then sure. I'm saying that because some of these guys might take a little bit longer. Some of these guys, Demetri Manning's the guy who, okay, if you give him 1, Devin Hyde 2, one of the receivers 3, now you're at 3. Christian Thatcher pushes visit, but I'm glad you mentioned that the overall accumulation of list is impressive, and because I think that's something that Washington has not really gotten credit for in the past, and maybe deservedly so. Have you maybe kind of expand on that? Have you sensed that Jedd is changing the perception of Washington in general by, recruiting nationally and really actually casting a wide net for deep talent, or just, getting kind of the flavor of the cup on the West Coast, so to speak?
I think he has set a trend. Washington does not recruit in the South. They've got a kid from Pensacola visiting. He doesn't get much further apart than Pensacola and Seattle. So, he's recruiting kids from Tennessee. He's recruiting kids from Alabama. CJ May's going to visit, et cetera. They figured it out on how to do that and spot recruit in addition to keeping their base. It's not one or the other. They're doing both. You can never give up your base. Some schools bring in a new staff and they got a lot of guys that aren't familiar with it and they just recruit where they're from. That's not how it works, man. It's not how it works. Fan bases get real irritable about that too. So there's a lot of politics with it. Washington's doing a good job of spot recruiting, and I think it's caught some people's eye. I actually mentioned this to John Garcia recently, a buddy of mine that works with Rivals. He's the Southeast recruiting analyst for Rivals. Like, what's Washington doing down here? Like, they got guys visiting. They never recruit down here. So they have caught the attention of people.
How much do you think that some of that might be the Michael Penix effect? Being a guy from Tampa, being a guy from down in that area, is that something where maybe, you look at it 3, 4, 5 years down the line? I know it's something that, everybody always talks about Oregon and LaMichael James and that same mindset of, LaMichael James turned people on to Oregon. Is that something where maybe you look at this in 3, 4, 5 years and it's, Michael Penix was really something that started driving that Washington being able to move into the South a little bit more?
Well, he played at Tampa Tech, which is one of the best programs in Florida. I know it well because I lived in Tampa. It can't hurt, and he's a top 10 pick. You would think it's got to be at least some kind of influence, right? And he's a good guy. He's very highly thought of in the Tampa area. It's probably going to help. And he was in the Heisman race, blah, blah, blah. It's a factor. I would say that's definitely a factor.
Lars, you got anything else?
Is there one of the South guys that you could actually see ending up at Washington, and maybe not that on this weekend? Because I do know that there is a talented younger brother of a former USC quarterback from Alabama coming to visit in June. I'm talking about Anquan Fagans. Is there any of these guys that you can see have? I'm not necessarily saying him per se, but is there any guy where you'd say it's a 50% or above chance that they get him, or even close to 50, just to play it safe?
I know that's what everybody wants to hear, but Southern kids going to Seattle, I got to see it. You know what I mean? I think they're just curious more than anything. Fagans, from what I'm told, as of yesterday, is a heavy Auburn lean, but that's not shocking. He lives 2 hours from Auburn. You know what I mean? It's not a rough thing to guess on. But that's why you take the visits. Washington is completely different than these Southern schools. Most Southern schools are pretty much all the same. It really is. You're just making a football decision. They're just state U, etc. Washington is a complete culture change, etc. And either the kid does or doesn't want to go there based on the visit. You won't know until they're already gone from Seattle after the OV. But they're going to get somebody like that. It'll just be random, which is kind of fun. And that's why recruiting is fun. But, I don't know which one it'll be, brother.
Brian, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers for tuning in. We've got so much more stuff coming for you from this big weekend of official visits. To make sure you stay tuned and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere, updating this channel with new content every single day. Make sure you like the video, click that bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Leave us a 5-star review for your audio only. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Friday.